I believe that schools are communities for everybody to learn. It's not just a place for kids to learn. It's a place for our teachers to learn. It's a place for me as a leader to learn. It's a place for our parents to learn. It's a place for our community to learn. And I just realized the work that I was able to do with adults is why I got up every day and did the work.
Welcome to Momentum Now by MVP, the podcast that delves into the stories of seasoned professionals, charismatic leaders, and passionate catalysts. Join us as we explore their career achievements, the challenges they've overcome, and their advice for young professionals of color navigating a fulfilling career journey. Today, our co-hosts Bob Brooks and Karen McFarland speak with Jeffrey Veale Jr., Managing Director of Alumni Programs and Leadership Experiences at Teach for America. Jeffrey shares his journey from rural North Carolina to teaching in Uganda and founding a charter school in Memphis, Tennessee. He reveals the personal and professional lessons he's learned along the way, how navigating discomfort shaped his success, and the importance of representation in education, especially for young people of color.
Hey, Bob. How are
Karen, you? How are you? You've been busy. I saw a few posts. I saw a few posts on LinkedIn. You've had a busy 10 days or so. How you doing?
I have. It was really energizing working with this council that I'm on for the American Marketing Association. And so it's too long to describe, but we were together for 6 days, and it's a wonderful tribe of human beings. And we laughed and we learned and we leveled up and we did all sorts of wonderful things. So, but I get to now cap off my week with you.
Love it. Love it. And we have an incredible guest today. I'm super excited about this as well.
We do. So, hi, Jeffrey.
Okay. Hi, Bob.
Hey, Jeffrey.
So, Jeffrey, we have Jeffrey Veale Jr. He's the Managing Director of Alumni Programs and Leadership Experiences for Teach for America. He also helped found a K-8 charter school, and he's an alum of UNC and Christian Brothers University, where he obtained his master's degree. So welcome, Jeffrey. We're so excited to have you today.
Yeah, Jeffrey, let's start at the beginning. We know that you live in Atlanta, but have you always lived in Atlanta? And have you, was that your schooling at UNC? Were you in North Carolina? Did you start there? And tell us about your career journey. Bring that to light.
Yep. So not from Atlanta. I'm originally from a small town called Lewiston, North Carolina, which is in the far east part of North Carolina. Super rural. So grew up there all of my life. Went to K-12 schooling there, public education. And after high school, I was like, where do I want to go to college? And I wasn't ready to move out of North Carolina yet. So ended up attending the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where I majored in education policy. And after college, it was like, what do I do next? And the summer after my junior year of college, I had an opportunity to go to Uganda, where I taught 4th and 5th grade math. And that experience is literally why I do what I do. One day while I was teaching, a student who wasn't even in my classroom, not sure why she wasn't in her classroom, came to me and gave me a letter. And the letter was actually addressed to my mom. And it said, "Thank you very much for sending your son to Uganda. He is the one who gives us hope, and we be with joy in our hearts."
Wow.
And that moment was just so touching for me because at this point, I'm a stranger in this area. I had only been here about 3 days. The student wasn't even in my classroom. So for her to see something in me within such a short period of time, but also use the term hope in what often feels like a hopeless situation, made me realize that I can have this much of an impact in an area that's not mine. Imagine the impact that I can have back in the States. To Carolina, like I said, I was an education policy major. And honestly, I did education policy because education, the profession of education, was something that wasn't valued in my area. Teachers in North Carolina wasn't getting paid. Black men, quote unquote, didn't teach. So there was just a lot of things going through my mind that kind of steered me away from doing direct work within education. So that moment really made me want to do direct work within education. So came back to Carolina. It was too late to change my major to teaching directly in education, and found out about a program called Teach for America, which is an alternative way to get into teaching. So I applied to Teach for America. I got in. I moved to Memphis, Tennessee. So right after North Carolina, I started, quote unquote, my adulthood in Memphis and taught third grade math in Memphis for 3 years. While there, also co-founded and led a school there for 6 years before moving to where I am now, which is Atlanta, Georgia. So still on the East Coast, like North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, and excited to be in Atlanta now. I've been in Atlanta now for almost going on 4 years.
Wow.
That's so amazing.
Wow.
So is there anything that, just coming full circle, and you taught in Uganda and you started teaching here in the States, like, were there any major differences? Does anything pop out in terms of either the education system or even just the children?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the thing that popped out for me, particularly when I went to Uganda, is I knew when I came back to the States, I wanted to go and teach in a place where I was needed because I just saw the impact that you could have on people who actually wanted the support, but may not necessarily have had like the right people to give them that support or just the access. So there were differences when I moved to Memphis. When I moved to Memphis, I ended up teaching at that time at a school that was called a turnaround school, which means before I got there, they got rid of everybody in the building. They got rid of the principal. They hired a brand new principal and he hand selected everybody who was going to be on that new staff. And per what the requirement was, he could only keep 2 people on staff and he only kept the librarian and the art teacher. Everybody else at this school was new. And just context about this school was classified as a turnaround school because this school was in the bottom 5% of schools in the state of Tennessee. And instead of giving those schools or this particular school over to the state, it was like, we're going to give you one more chance to get it right. So the district created a program called the Innovation Zone, where at this time, I think there were about 6 or 7 schools in this portfolio. My school, they brought in a new principal. He handpicked his staff. The principal kind of had more autonomy over the school in the way that it was ran and just was able to work with talented people and to just see the work that we were able to do like in our first year, but also like each additional year after that was super impactful. So the correlation for me between that and Uganda is that I really went into a place where I was needed. Like our kids were not at the levels that they should have been in. The year before I got to my school, I taught third grade math. The year before I got there, out of about 100 students in third grade, only about 3 of them were proficient or advanced on the end of state test. And that was third grade math. And typically, like in my experience, kids typically do better in math than they do reading. So imagine what those like reading and literacy scores was like. So was able to go into a place like where I was truly needed, got the support that I needed to get the work done. And I guess the difference between Uganda and being here, like in the States working in Memphis, was that when I was in Uganda, like our resources were very limited. Like we didn't have textbooks, like we didn't have copier machines to make copies. So I was fortunate enough to be in a school that had the resources, had additional funding to get the resources that our kids need. But I also think my experience in Uganda made me learn how to work with what I have. So if I moved to Memphis and I didn't have all of the luxuries that other schools had, I had an experience where for 2 months I made it work without. So just being there, I developed like this resilience and this just grit and doing whatever it takes to make sure that my kids could achieve.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. If we could pivot and talk about Teach for America, and Karen and I realized it was founded back in 1989, I believe, based on a thesis that was written at Princeton University. It started there, and where it is now. What are the big changes over the over the last 20 or so years that? And is there anything that you think is foundational that's still in place and important for our listeners to know?
Yep. Such a big question, Bob. Bob is taking me back to 1989. And before I joined Teach for America, I actually had a chance to read our founder's book, Wendy Kopp's book, around just like the founding. So like when I read the book, I was amazed around like literally like you are in college, like, and at that point, like when I applied to Teach for America, I was in college. I'm like, what? You're doing a thesis and then you're creating an entire organization, like you're getting money from like these funders. But when I think about Teach for America in 1989, 1990, it is a very different organization than it is now. And I will name that the views that I'm expressing are Jeffrey views. This is not, or my views are not views of me like working for the organization. Honestly, when I joined Teach for America and thinking about Teach for America in the 90s, like Teach for America was very white. And oftentimes when I think about like the criticism that you see about Teach for America, it is you have the rich white people from these Ivy League institutions who are going into communities to make an impact. Sometimes we're unsure of why they're making that impact, because some of the criticism with Teach for America is that they're using these 2 years to figure out what they want to do, or they're using these 2 years as like a stepping stone for them to apply to law school and for them to apply to like be a doctor. Because like back then and even now, like Teach for America was like a very high regarded program. So when I think about changes over time, I will say I recognize that Teach for America has become very clear around like why it exists and the mission. So I think when a lot of people think about Teach for America, they think about a program where people fresh out of college or professionals go to teach for 2 years and then they move on to do something else in their careers. And I think that narrative is now shifting, where we have some people who are or have become career teachers. So they taught for 2 years and then they decided to teach a third year. They decided to teach a 10th year and they found that teaching is their thing. We've had some people who have taught and then moved up into school leadership roles, as I did myself. Like I taught for my 2 years. I then decided that I wanted to teach another year, and then I wanted to expand impact in the education sector. So I was like, let me take the leap of faith and like co-found a charter school. Um, so I think that narrative is shifting around. We're not just teaching 2 years. People are teaching beyond that. People are assuming other roles. And I think another piece of that is, I guess, another way that I see Teach for America has changed is that Teach for America is not just an organization that's placing teachers in classrooms to teach. Because after those 2 years, we go into what is called alumnihood. And Teach for America has now taken a stance on how are we still supporting our people who may have decided to teach a third year? How are we supporting our people who have now decided to get into an assistant principal role or a principal role? How are we supporting our people who decided to step outside of the traditional field of education, but go into medicine where they're working with kids? And like, how does their Teach for America experience influence how they approach their medical practice? So I think a biggest difference, or some of the biggest difference I have seen, has just been how Teach for America is supporting teachers and leaders beyond that second year, but also like their approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So like when we think about Teach for America, then like our leadership team was very white heavy. Whereas when we think about our executive leadership team now, most of our exec team, maybe a little bit off, but I want to say 75% of them are women of color at the exec level. So our CEO, our president and COO, like our chief equity officer. So I've seen a shift in that, like at the top level, but also at the regional level with people teaching, where some of our cores in our regions are heavily people of color. They're identifying as coming from low income communities, which is where they're serving. So a lot of change that I've seen, because clearly like this is what 30 plus years later, but I think some of the proudest ones are what I noticed around just seeing more diversity in our core, seeing more diversity in our leadership team, expanding around like how do we reach our mission of one day. Yeah, and I'm very proud of that. And obviously I'm proud because I was a Teach for America core member and now I'm working on the national team of the organization.
Fantastic. Thanks for
I
that
love it.
history.
It's so important because, as you mentioned, lack of diversity, and also like Black men don't teach, right? And I'm just thinking
Yep.
about my experiences growing up. Now I'm a woman of a certain age. We won't call it age, but I did not have. I'm thinking. I did not have one Black teacher. There was one Black substitute teacher, and that was it. I think I only had a Black teacher in college when I took African American studies. And then we're going to fast forward with my son. Now, caveat is I put him in private school. Um, the only Black face was the athletics director, right? And so, and that's just, just Black people, right? So I didn't even see Latino people. Like, I just didn't see a mixture of
Yeah.
ethnicities growing up, or even more recently in my son's schools. But like I said, his caveat is that it's private school, which is a different beast. I went to public school. So I think it's really important for children to see themselves and as they're growing up in their educational experience. And I think that's super important. And
Yep.
I'm so glad. I'm wondering what called you to teach. Like, if you have young people out there that are thinking about this
Yeah.
career, what called you to
Yep.
teach? And then also, just as the person you are, what are the challenges that
Hmm.
you've kind of faced, and how can someone that wants to go into this field try to overcome them or manage or navigate them?
Yep. Great question. So, what called me to teach, and what are some challenges? And that's always an interesting question around what called me to teach, because I think back to when I was 5 years old, and I had a first cousin, and we was always play. I was also raised as an only child. Um,
Me too.
So
Me
my
too.
cousins were my sisters. They were my brothers. So I realized, like, when I would go to my grandmother's house, or when my cousin would come to my house, or I would go to her house, there was always this thing about me playing school that I never really understood. So, like, I like playing the teacher and like her being the student. Like, I would walk to the kitchen, and the kitchen was the workroom where I went and made my fake copies, and I would bring the papers back. She would complete the papers. I would grade the papers. We would walk down the hall to go to lunch. Like, we always played school. But I think growing up, I just looked at it as like, we're kids and we're just playing. We're modeling what we see happening in our lives. And as I continue to get older, the things that I involved myself with, through my involvement, I realized that I was pulled towards teaching. So, like, I tutored at like the after school center, like I tutored at the daycare. I was quote unquote teacher's pet when I was helping like the teacher's grade paper. So, like, everything that attracted me revolved around the field of education. I also got experience doing other things as well, because, like, growing up, like I said, like, we didn't see Black men teach, and not saying that my parents didn't value teaching. Parents, I feel like most parents, when they have like bright kids, is like, you're going to be a doctor or you're going to be a lawyer. Like, I want you to be better than me. Like, I want you to make more money. Like, I want you to save the world. And their ideas of what saving the world is. So when I did those medical internships at the hospital my junior year, I was like, I don't like this. Like, I'm glad and grateful to have this experience, but like, this is not fueling me at all. So education, I think, for me, has been something that has been in my core. It was just something that I was afraid to tap into, because I felt that I will let other people down because they've invested so much into me to allow me to get the education that I receive. Although, growing, like, when I went to college, I'm like, I got an education. It wasn't an excellent education. Like, I got what at that time I thought it was great, but I'm like, when I went to college, I'm like, I had totally different experience than my peers have had. Um, so then, like I said earlier, when I went to Uganda, for me, like, that solidified what I wanted to do. But I think it also took me leaving like my hometown, which was small town, very Black, Christian minded values. Like, the list goes on, where people just thought one way. And I went to a university that had 500 plus student organizations, that, like, you literally could be who you wanted to be in college. So I went there and I was just exposed to different. Um, and then I just realized that it was okay to be who you are and do what you want to do and like be different. So that gave me the confidence to do what I wanted to do. But I think also for other people, they saw the experiences that was giving me joy and then began to support the work that I would do. But honestly, I can say after college, or when I went to college, I didn't care if you want to support the work that I wanted to do. Like, I was going to do it because it was my life. Um, so when I think about challenges, I believe that was a part of your question. I think a challenge for me was really being me, like, getting outside of like my parents' shadows, getting outside of my family shadows, getting outside of like my inspiring teacher shadows to like truly do what I wanted to do. And I'm glad that I took that path, because for me, money matters, but me doing something truly that I love matters. Because yes, I could have been a doctor and like all of these things making X amount of money. But when I went home every day, would I have been happy? Would I have had joy? Would I have wanted to get up to go and make X amount of money? So I think a challenge again was living into myself, truly doing what's for me and not listening to other people. And I'm not saying I'm ignoring other people because I appreciate them sharing things with me, but I just had to learn how to do it myself. And I think another challenge for me, which made it hard, was that I didn't see, like we said, I didn't see Black men in education. For me, I saw my PE teacher as the Black man. I saw the coaches on the football field and on the basketball court as Black men. So if I'm stepping into this role, am I demasculine myself for the work that I truly want to do? But as I continue to like do more research and education, I began to see a little bit more men like stepping into the field, like realize that like you're not demasculizing yourself or like you're not doing any of these things to make yourself or this profession is not making you feel less than. You truly doing what you're doing. And then I begin to see like the joy in people doing what they did because I saw it on both ends. I saw people who love to do what they do, whether it was education or not, and I saw people who didn't. And most of the people that didn't enjoy what they were doing were people who weren't living into their calling. They were doing something because of the money. So yeah, I know I said a lot, so I'll pause right there for you to follow.
That's so deep that was the thought that you thought that that's because many people probably think that teaching demasculates you, right? And
Yep.
that's because traditionally, right, it has been a female position, even
Yep.
going back decades and decades and decades. But it's so important for boys to see,
Mhm.
and because when they don't, what is that giving them? How is that feeding them
Yeah.
long term? So I just think that
Yep.
I never thought about that
Yeah.
for me because
Yep.
I'm
And
female. So
and I would add like girls too. It's important for boys and girls to see that because oftentimes we see our women who are leading the education spaces, and then I mean when we go back years ago, but I mean, I feel like it still happens now. Like we see our women leading the education field, and then when our students leave school and go into these jobs, sometimes it kind of switch for them where it's like I no longer see the women, like I see the men, and now I don't know how to approach men because I'm looking at them as these authority figures because I haven't built strong relationships with men throughout my K through 12 education. So I think it goes both ways. It goes both ways.
Wow.
Jeffrey, thank you for sharing all that. It's really remarkable that you've gone from teaching overseas, founding a charter school. Now you're at Teach for America. When you look back at all that, what advice would you have given yourself when you're just coming out of your undergraduate? Right? What advice would you? That letter, yeah, right.
Yep.
What's the letter that you would send yourself, your
Yep.
22-year-old self? Have you thought about that? And do you have any advice for our listeners?
Yeah, I have. I think the first piece is like be you, like be authentic, be genuine, like all of those synonyms, because like you are the only one that live your life. And I know that there are like outside forces, people who are like talking in your ear. I'm not saying ignore those. It's like listen to those, but figure out which one of these do I leave in my back pocket, which do I take out and bring to the forefront. So being you, I will also say trust the process because the process isn't necessarily easy, but I'm not going to say the process is not rewarding. So when I think about my school leadership journey, and even the work that I do now, and it's so wild when I tell people this, I tell people I never dreamed of being a school leader. Like I knew that I wanted to teach, but I never dreamed of being a school leader. And I feel like my journey into school leadership was appropriate, and I'm not going to say it just kind of happened because clearly there were steps doing it, but I think I just organically found my way to every role that I did. So after I completed my 2-year commitment with Teach for America, it was like I was just using each year to figure out what was next. So people were like, are you going to teach a third? They was asking me this is my first year. Like, are you going to teach a third year? I was like, I don't know. I haven't even begun my first year of teaching yet. And then like after my first year, they asked that. And then like my second year, they asked that. And like I always knew probably like 2 months before my contract ended, like what was next. So my fourth year, which is when I joined the team to found the charter school. I was like, whoa, because I was a very young school leader. Like I co-founded a school like my fourth year like formally in education. And
That's
today,
amazing.
like, it's the riskiest decision I've ever made because when I joined our team, we didn't have a school building. We didn't have our first teacher. We didn't have our first kid. Like, we had a vision. Like, we didn't have the money. Like, we had a little bit of money, but we didn't have like all of the money. Like, we had a vision. And to just see that come into fruition, it made me realize what happens when you are truly passionate about what you're doing. You're committed to the work, and when you trust the process. And then like after that, like I was at that school for 6 years, still connected to the school because it's hard to leave something that you like literally brought from the ground up. I think a transition period for me was like when I left school leadership to figure out, I'm still in school leadership, but when I left that role to figure out what was next. So I knew in 2021 that I was leaving Memphis. I had already told my executive director because another piece about education is that you give so much of yourself sometimes that you can lose yourself. So I think that's another piece of advice I would give. Like, you're doing this work. I'm not going to say for us, you're doing this work with others. And like, I was in a space where I feel like sometimes I just lost myself because I was just giving so much. So a part of me stepping back from being a principal was to take care of myself, to be closer to my family, to be closer to my friends. As a leader, I wasn't going home to see my parents often because they were 13 hours away. So I realized like I was missing the Mother's Day celebration, like I was missing the birthdays. But as soon as a family member passed away, I was immediately on a flight home to like take care of them. So realized that like I had to do a better job at taking care of myself. So when I came to Atlanta, it was like, what do I do next? So I think that was a challenge for me, and advice that I'm giving to others that I'm giving to myself is like, be you, like trust the process. But I think the other piece of advice is understanding what fuels you and gives you joy. So when I thought about what was next, I'm like, well, what do I do? Because for some people, being a principal or a school leader is the goal. Like co-founding a school is the goal. Like those were never goals for me. It just happened on my
Mhm.
journey. So the job search process for the role that I'm in now was very difficult. And I realized that it was difficult because I didn't think about what gave me the most joy in my job. I went on the market saying, like, I co-founded the school. I led it for 6 years. Like, I know how to fundraise. I know how to manage adults. I know human resource. Like, I know all the things, but you can't be great at all. You can be good at all things, but you're not great at all things. So I thought about what gave me the most joy in my role as a school leader. And yes, I was there for the kids. And what gave me the most joy was like adult leadership and development. I believe that
Mm.
schools are communities for everybody to learn. It's not just a place for kids to learn. It's a place for our teachers to learn. It's a place for me as a leader to learn. It's a place for our parents to learn. It's a place for our community to learn. And I just realized the work that I was able to do with adults is why I got up every day and did the work. Like I love when I went into a classroom, coach the teacher on something, see him or her implement it, and then the light bulb goes off in front of the classroom. And it just like makes you smile, um, which is how I got into the work that I do now, which is essentially adult leadership and development. So I think those are three pieces. And I can't even remember what I said. I think one is being you, like being yourself. Two, trusting the process. And then like three, like figuring out what gives you joy and running with that. You only get one life, you have to live it.
I love that. I love that. I love that that just full circle moment. You know, I have a couple of friends that are teachers. I had one that she math teacher, math teacher. She went into school leadership, assistant principal, and then assistant superintendent. And she
Hmm.
left because she wasn't as connected to the students as she really wanted to be. So she went back and she's doing math coaching. So she's
Yeah.
teaching the adults who are teaching the kids. And she
Yeah.
really always touched base in the classroom because she liked that full circle moment. So I just listening to her and now
Yeah.
listening to you, I see why that's so incredibly important.
In terms of personal and professional development,
Yeah.
what are the resources, strategies, anything that's helped you in becoming who you are today? What's really fueled your growth, and is there any advice there for others?
Yeah. What's fueled largely a part of my growth has been my family. I've been privileged to just be around a family who, one, have just been models for me, but who have also supported me in the process. Honestly, supported me whether they wanted to or not. But the not was because they knew that this was something that I was passionate about. So I think just having other people in my corner and recognizing that sometimes family may not be people that you're related to by blood. And I think sometimes we get caught up in that. When I say family, it's like anybody that's in your network and in your circle that's feeling you. So if you don't have that through your biological family, how are you seeking out different mentors or like teachers in your building, like professors in your courses to support you? Um, so I'll say family is one. And Bob, I just forgot your question. Say your question one more time.
No, I was just wondering what resources
Yeah.
have really fueled your development over the
Yeah.
years.
So I would say family is one. I will also say just modeling and shadowing. So once you, and I say, think you know what you want to do, because I think that's another piece. I think oftentimes, particularly as kids, we leave high school and feel like we have to have it figured out, or we leave college and feel like we have to have it figured out. But understanding like life is a journey and you may not have it, and that is okay. But the second piece of that is, as you're starting to identify things that are important to you or professions that you may want to get involved with, find those people that are doing those things and ask them questions. Ask them, can I shadow you at the hospital? Can I shadow you at the law office? Can I come sit in the back of your classroom and observe you teach? To just get a feel for what that's like and begin asking questions. And I tell people, do that early. I think about myself as a school leader in my first year. And when we started our school, we started off with just kindergarten and first grade, and we added one grade level each year. So when we started, we only had 5 and 6 year olds, and I was committed to making sure we had a career day every year of our school. So we started career day with our kindergartens and first graders, and now the kindergartens and first graders that we started with are now eighth and ninth graders. But I think about over the course of all of those years, we've exposed them to so many different people, so many organizations, that some of our students, they already have networks of people that they have been continuously in touch with. And they're like ninth grade. So finding ways to just get connected to the work, talking to people. And then I think now, which I mean, I still consider myself young, but like now we have the internet, and I feel like you can find anything and do anything on the internet. So just as we're on like our social medias, like liking people's stuff who are doing this or following people who are doing this, like follow people and like people who are doing the things that you want to do. There are a lot of like influencers who are teachers, who are doctors. And I'm not saying that like all of that is reality, because we recognize that, I mean, it is reality, but that's like a part of reality. And sometimes we only get to see the good part of reality on social media. But like talking to people to figure out like, what are those challenges in your role? So I knew that I wanted to teach, and teaching looked great to me, but I'm also asking questions to people around like, what are the challenging parts of teaching? Like, what are the things that you don't like about teaching? You have to change one thing, like, what would you change? So that when I got into the role, it's not like a culture shock. Because, like, sometimes we look at teachers on TV. I think about, like, Abbott Elementary. Like, we look at Abbott and it's like, oh, teaching is fun and blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, there's layers to that.
Go-
So, yeah, so those are three things.
Gosh, you hit a lot of great points there, and it triggers a quick story. I remember one of my son's friends said, because I've always been in healthcare communications, asked about, he asked a question about potentially being a pharmacist. And I was like, well, I really can't help you with that, but why do you want to be a pharmacist? And he gave a few reasons. And I was like, well, maybe you should speak with a pharmacist. And he did. He spoke with one pharmacist. He came back. He's like, there's no way I want to be a pharmacist. he learned that, it's an industry that's shifting, and big box stores and, the time constraints and, the numbers that have to be followed. He's like, I never want to do that. He ended up following a career of procurement, and is happy with that. But following folks in social media and asking questions and learning about it before making massive investments into maybe it's graduate school or a particular niche in an industry. That's great.
So going back to your experience in Uganda, right? From a personal perspective, not a professional perspective, growing up in America, touching the soil in Africa, and then coming back to America. Can you tell me just really quickly, like, how did that feel? Not all of us get the opportunity to do that.
That- No one has ever asked me that question, and that is a great question. Like, what is the feel? And I'm actually gonna take myself back to Uganda. And intentionally, before I left Uganda, like I was there for 2 months, before I left and came back, I made it a thing to stay in Uganda for about 4 days outside of the orphanage and outside of the work that I was doing to just be with myself in Uganda. So I went to the capital, stayed there for 3 nights, 4 days to just make sense of everything that had just happened. Like that was my first time ever out of the country. I'm 20 years old. And when I got to my hotel and like that I told you like the one of the girls had gave me a letter, but when I left, like everybody had wrote me letters and I was like, I'm not gonna read this until I'm not in y'all's presence. And I got to the hotel and I literally put all of those letters out on the bed and like read them and realized that that is what like culminated my experience there, but like that is what grounded my experience there. And I think about just life. I feel like when I was in Uganda, life was simple. Like
Mhm.
I took maybe just 6 outfits that I just washed. I took maybe 2 pairs of sandals and I was there. Like I was walking on the soil. Like I was going to like the corner stores that they had, getting me like the orange Fanta, like getting me the peanut butter. And I was realizing that I was happy. Like I was joyful. Like I didn't have all of the other, at that point, like worries, quote unquote, that I had when I was in the States. So when I came back to the US and I remember landing at JFK, connecting to get to Raleigh. And I just remember going through JFK's airport. And if you've been in New York, like you know what that experience is. And I'm like, wow, like I'm back in a very different place, which is the place that I had always known. But like
Mhm.
coming back just felt totally different. Like things felt like super commercialized. I'm like, what? Like, what is happening? Like, why are things complicated? So when I actually landed in Raleigh and like saw my parents like got back on the road, it began to put things into perspective for me again. Because when I was in Uganda, like I was on the back of like motorcycles, like I was in the vans traveling places. Like there weren't like large interstates and like all of these things. So like personally, what I think Uganda did for me is that it just grounded me like in a different type of life, in a life of like simplicity. I think oftentimes in America, we make things hard that does not have to be hard at all. So it's made me appreciate the simple life. I think people now call it like the soft life. Um, I think it also personally made me realize the impact that you can have on others when you're truly doing what you want to do. And like I said, going there personally made me truly realize why I was placed on this earth, and helped me align why I wanted to do what I wanted to do. Because, like I said, very similar to like teaching, like I knew the second year I was going to teach, the third year I was going to teach, the fourth year I was going to do leadership. That's the same way I approached my personal life. Like I didn't truly know what I was going to do after my senior year of high school. I mean, senior year of college. Like I literally did not know that until I got back from Uganda and I aligned those steps. But it was just Uganda was just such a beautiful experience to just be around just blackness and like going back to our roots and like it was just beautiful. It was beautiful.
Thank you for that. No, it just for me brings that a little full circle. Like I said, no, we don't always get to have those experiences. So I just really
Yeah.
want to touch on that. Bob, do you want me to do my rap? A quick rap?
If you can, this one's going to be a challenge, but yeah,
Okay.
go to it, Karen.
Sometimes it's corny when I do it, but I have 3 lessons. Okay.
Okay.
Lesson 1, all right, is be you, right? So be
You.
authentically yourself. Um, it's okay to be who you are and do what you want to do and be different. And even if it's a challenge being yourself, just go ahead and do it anyway. You said a lot more, but I'm doing quick. And then lesson 2 is do you, right? So don't lose yourself by giving too much of yourself, and understand what fuels you and gives you joy, and find mentors and people to help you understand what's going to bring you that joy.
Mhm.
And lesson number 3 is trust in you, because life is a journey and you don't have to have it all figured out. You should just trust the process.
Yep.
How'd I do, teacher?
That was a good follow-up.
Wow. A plus, Karen. A plus. That was great. That was great. Hey, Jeffrey, a couple rapid fire questions for you.
Oh, rapid fire.
Yeah, rapid fire. So just what comes first to mind, give it nice, crisp answers. Here we go. What was your favorite subject in high school?
Favorite subject is math. Love numbers.
And your least favorite subject?
The opposite of that was reading. Like I was not a reader. Like in high school or just school, I struggled with reading comprehension. Now I'm better, but I was like, reading? No.
Advice. You gave a lot of great advice today. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Best advice I've ever received is, I think the advice that I've already given is like, trust the process. Like there is no clear cut journey. Don't look at what other people are doing. Like get off social media. Like just realize that life is a journey. And if you don't have challenges, you can't be better. So appreciate those challenges.
Have you had some advice that wasn't very good and you're glad you didn't embrace it? What's some bad advice that you've heard and you want to pass on?
That's a great question. I'm not going to say that I've necessarily gotten bad advice, but I would say be careful on who you get an advice from, because sometimes everybody doesn't have the best intentions at heart. But I can't think of a specific example. But I know that sometimes I talk to people and I'm be like, you are actually not the person that I should be listening to. So it's really like checking your sources, like making sure who you're connecting with is credible.
Yeah, that's great. And then just as a final wrap up here, what's your why? Why do you do what you do?
Yep. I do what I do to just change the narrative about public education and to give kids like me who are growing up in low income communities that may not have the resources, like an opportunity to live and thrive in life.
Fantastic. Thank you for everything you do for so many, for all the students that have been impacted by your words and advice and your caring soul. It's fantastic to get to know you today. And yeah, thank you for being here.
Thank you all for
Jeffrey.
having me.
You're truly a blessing. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for listening. Have a great day.